Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, you got MJ. Welcome to another of the 50 most relevant as we talk through who I believe are the most relevant players across SuperCoach, DreamTeam and AFL Fantasy. With all of your formats open, you can go and start picking the players you want. So it's not just for assistant coach or gold users. Everybody now can be getting involved in their fantasy footy side for 2021. Talking about the number 22 player today, Isaac Heeney. I got him back on the episodes. I've got Kane. Hello, mate. How are you?
Very well, MJ. I reckon if we did this podcast, a couple months ago and we took the temperature of the community, I reckon Heeney was almost pushing the top 10.
Yep.
And it just feels like as people have looked at the squads and they've looked at the players that he's competing against in the forward line and they've seen the bye rounds come out, it just feels like he's starting to drift a little bit. First everyone was, there's plenty of value there.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's more of a split. And there's still the Heeney lovers.
Yes.
But I just feel like people are starting to understand how competitive this forward line is.
Yeah, especially if you're spending that much.
Yeah. And how competitive this buy round is and how troublesome this buy round can be if you're not prepared. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this chat because there's just so many different elements to this guy that I find absolutely fascinating.
He's a real interesting player. He is forward eligible for us. In fact, just pure forward for us this year. 24's. Come on, MJ. Learn to speak grammar, mate. 24 years old. Sydney Swan is a best ever SuperCoach score. Came last year, round 1 against the Adelaide Crows. It was a 152. In that same game, his best AFL fantasy score for the year was a 101. If you want to play the adjusted average game, fine. I normally don't like to do that on individual scores, but that's up around that 120 marker for you if you want to do that, which is handy enough. His best ever SuperCoach score, like I said, it was a 152, but just last year, while back in 2016, his best ever SuperCoach score, AFL fantasy score rather, was a 132. 70.6 is his AFL fantasy average from last year, which adjusted is an 88.25, while in SuperCoach, still a good average from Isaac Heeney last year, even with the injury that ultimately ruined his season. He still averaged 94. 2 years consecutive he's done that, but he's not priced at either of those formats that way because he does have an injury discount for us. In SuperCoach, he's going to set you back just over 450K, 603,000 in AFL Fantasy, and just $587,300 in Dream Team. And it feels a long time ago, Kane, because it's almost been a year to cast your mind back to round 1. That round where, as it kept going, footy fans and football players and the community were like, are we even going to get to round 2? Which ultimately we didn't get to for a number of months. But in that first game of the year, Isaac Heeney tore the game apart. I don't know if you remember it at Amy's Stadium against the Crows at Adelaide Oval, it was Crows fly out at the gate early in the first quarter. And then it was just all Sydney pretty much until the last 10 minutes of the game. And one of the reasons they won the game was a multi-goal effort from Isaac Heeney, delivering a ton across the format. And his biggest SuperCoach game, and fans and fantasy players were thinking, finally, it's clicking for Isaac Heeney. Sadly, injury got in the way and ruined what was at times building to be a nice little start to the season.
You can't start the season in better fashion, MJ, can you? He was clear best on ground. I think the interesting thing is for fantasy owners is it was an amazing game. As you mentioned, you reeled off how big the scores were, but the role was a key forward. You really look at that side. You've got 2 young guys in McCartan and Blakey alongside Hayward. And Heeney was that guy. He was that spearhead they were looking forward to. Again, while not prototypical key forward height, if you want to just talk about the role he was playing in the side, he was the focal point. He kicked 4 goals, 1. And again, it's 16 touches. And this is what we've said about Heeney in the past, MJ, is his role in the side. When he plays that role, and I think he will keep playing that role where it's probably 80% forward when he's on the ground with, 20% mid, it's really hard to compete with the likes of Sidebottom, Dunkley, Dangerfield, these guys that are really more up around, even up to 60% mid-time. We know the threshold for forward eligibility is 35%. So there's some guys who, just picked up forward eligibility and they're really primarily midfielders. Heeney, while we've had that desire to see him in the midfield, the way I look at the Swans side, when you've got Kennedy and Parker as those key guys in there that, when they're on the field, they're at the centre bounce, they're chasing the ball all over the ground.
Yeah.
And you throw in the development of a James Rowbottom, George Hewitt, we know they love the roles he does when he's fit and healthy. They've brought in a Dylan Stevens in the past to play a bit more of an outside role. Like, they're pretty strong in that area. And I think they've sort of found that we're having a better time recruiting midfielders. And even guys like McInerney on the outside showed some real run and dash to be a nice contrast to a Parker and a Kennedy. What's really hard, and it's been hard due to injury, is finding goals. With no Franklin and Reed struggling with injury as well, Heeney has had to play that key role. And I think he's a victim of being good at both roles.
Yeah.
He's so good as a forward and he's so good as a mid. And I think the comparison that jumps to most people's minds is Toby Green.
Yeah,
we know that Toby's a gun midfielder. And when we've seen Isaac in the midfield, he's sensational also. But it is so hard to replace those guys out of the forward line because they're so good one-on-one.
Yeah.
And there's such an awkward matchup for the opponent to play against.
Yeah, I keep looking back to Isaac Heeney's 2019 season. Like, he started slow. In fact, I think after 2 rounds, people were looking at his scoring in all formats of the game and going, okay, he's not the premium that I thought he was, and I'm getting ready to move him on. But in spite of a bit of a slow start that year, he still ended up averaging 89. It gave himself 9 tons across the year. And he just had 5 scores below 70. Granted, a couple of them were in the first 2 rounds. In SuperCoach that year, he averaged 94, reaching the triple figure marker in 9 games, 3 of them over 130. And again, only 4 scores that he failed to score 70 or above. And so while people might go, I remember how he burnt me at the start of 2019, and then in 2020, he got injured and he's burnt me again. Remember, it wasn't that bad, because in the opening 11 games of 2019, he averaged 84 in fantasy, 90 in SuperCoach. The final 11 games of the year, not a huge jump, but a jump enough. 94 in AFL fantasy, 97 in SuperCoach. And prior to his injury-affected year last year that saw him only play a handful of games, this is what his 3 seasonal averages have been before that. 92, 90, 89 in fantasy and dream team, 97, 97, and 94. And this forward line, Kane, really fascinates me. I'm keen to talk not just about the Swans, but about the top guys that we can look at as top 5 to 10 guys. And it's always, look, you can build negatives into everyone. There's absolutely. So you can talk yourself in and out of a players, but you've got someone like a Steel Sidebottom. Career year for him in terms of what he was able to deliver in the shortened season. But they have lost a pretty important player in Adam Treloar through the midfield. I know they're going to try to bring more kids through there, but I still think he's the number 1 tag target. Like, if you want to beat Collingwood and you've got the ability to use a midfield stopper, you're going to steal. Then you think about Patrick Dangerfield. Gun, fully fit, probably the best forward we've got this year across the formats. But it's got a bit of groin soreness. Okay. All right, let's put him to the side. Josh Dunkley got the potential to be the number 1 forward. Also got the potential to be the first TPP player we've ever got and play in triple positions across the year. Like, it's just so uncertain what the Bulldogs do. Dane Zorko, we talked about him just the other day, historically storms home, but probably not the greatest starting squad option. Rowan Marshall should be a good option for us this year. But still, the very best of Marshall has been Sol Ruck. At this time, Paddy Wright is there. So you start to look at these Tom Phillips only really had 1 good year, and that was at another club. Now all of a sudden you start getting down to an Isaac Heeney and go, look, maybe he's not a top 5 guy. Maybe he's not the 95 pluser. But if his range is 5 points of deviation either side of a 90, and if you're not convinced about the big bucks on the big boys up forward, you could find yourself believing that at best he's a 95 guy and he competes with the top 5. or at worst, because he does have a little bit of a discount due to missing games, he becomes a low risk that drifts to F6. So I suppose it all becomes, what do you want to do with your starting squad, and what do you believe he's going to do?
Yeah, I think again, MJ, it's what are you doing elsewhere? I think if you want to take player A to player B and player B's 100K more, and you're looking at your side and you're going, geez, that's a good upgrade, player A to player B. How can I get this cash? How can I get this cash? And you've got the guys you mentioned, Sidey, Dunks, Zorko. I think you're going to start seeing, Isaac Heeney for a bit cheaper. Mm-hmm. He might be close enough. He might be, and the thing I'd be looking at is he closer? What you think Heeney is versus Dangerfield, is he closer than A and B? Because if A and B is, you think that's going to get you 15 points upside, and dropping Danger down to Heeney loses you 10, well, you've made some points in, obviously your best estimations. The hard thing with Heeney, MJ, is he has a big ceiling.
Yep.
But on the flip side, there is some games where, as I said, he's playing a key forward role. He can roll out, a month of 65, 70 scores.
That's what he did at the start of 2019. Yeah.
So that's where, for me, you're picking him. He's a keeper. Your intention is he's in my forward line all year.
Yeah.
And again, I think you can be rewarded with a guy, as you mentioned, he's priced in the mid 80s. He proven
can go 90s.
Proven he can go 90s, even high 90s in SuperCoach, which is clearly his preferred format. Like, that is encouraging, and that probably is enough, especially with the holes that you've flagged in those other guys. Even if you step down, what's Michael Walters' role?
Yeah.
Again, massive scores as a mid, but we saw the rise of that young Fremantle brigade, and we still think Fremantle's, weakness in their side structurally is goals.
Yeah.
And I think they've got a pretty solid defense. I think the midfield's quite strong. Again, it would be great if Sean Darcy could get a run at it. But if you're looking at a line that's troublesome, and it's probably why they had, Longmuir was such an important figure in getting the defense right, because I think he thought we're going to be more competitive locking down and just scrapping our way to goals. Like, we're not going to get in shootouts. Like we saw when GWS got in a shootout with them and they had to be attacking to try to score. They're not set up in that way. They don't have the cattle. But, hey, having Michael Walters down there, that's a matchup that they like. So that's another guy that you're probably, not super keen on. And it makes Heeney feel really comfortable. I think what you'll start seeing is if he has a good preseason, he has a big game, and ownership goes through the roof, there's going to be people who become contrarians just purely out of tactics, going, okay, Heeney at 50% ownership, I think I can take him on and get.
Yeah.
And the thing as well, MJ, as we know, is 50% ownership's a bit misleading, because often with ownership, all people really care about is, the top 5, 10,000 players. Yeah. And if a player like that has a good preseason, that number in that real key pool that you're competing against is probably up more around 75%, really.
Yeah.
So that's where people can go, hey, this guy's volatile. Again, obviously I'm chancing that he doesn't hurt me with a 150 like he started last year. But hey, if I've got another guy that I really like if you were clever enough to grab the 2019 Travis Boak, if you know that player, if you were smart enough to see that Petrarca was that guy, if you can find that player in the preseason, again, if you really want to push for the top, you have to differentiate yourself at some point, whether that's picking someone different or not picking someone popular. Like, that's really the only two ways you can do it. Obviously, there's a bit of luck, a bit of captaincy, but really, if your goal is top, like we're talking top 100, you can't just follow the pack on, this person's, Tom Stewart was injured, so now he's at his cheapest. Again, not saying it's a bad move, but sometimes you have to go against that obvious player just to see if luck falls your way. Hey, I'm not going to go this player, and then maybe you get lucky and there's a concussion. Like, you're talking about finishing in the top players. And sometimes a guy like Heeney with that volatility, sometimes you can give him a miss and get rewarded.
Well, you talk about outside of a handful of games in SuperCoach, he's not got a huge ceiling to hurt you. Similarly in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, if you want a guy that you go, he can open up the year averaging 115 plus across the formats, he'd have to have some pretty significant adjustments to that midfield forward split. Because while Sydney have gone really heavy on drafting midfielders through the past couple of years, and you've mentioned them, they've also gone just in the past 12 months and made some big additions in that forward line, more key positions. Father-son Nick Blakey, Logan McDonald was picked up last year. And so it starts to become that interesting thing of, say, how do they use Isaac Heeney? And that starts to become that thing where you're like, okay, I don't know if he's going to be all forward all the time. Okay, that's good. He should bump up his score, but then he's not going to spend enough mid-time to lift that ceiling. So I do think he's around that 90 guy this year. And then the margin of error is 5 points either way. But I don't think he's much more than that. But I think in a couple of the formats, that's still relevant. Let's pick AFL Fantasy. I know, Kane, you've got some thoughts in a second. In AFL Fantasy, he's priced alongside Tom Phillips. Who would you rather have, Phillips or Heeney? For 100,000 more, you can go from Caldwell, who seems to be the hype guy, and maybe for a valid reason. We'll find out in about 10 weeks whether that's valid or not. But for 100,000 more, you could go and get Isaac Heeney, who again has got years of being a 90 guy. And in AFL Fantasy, just purely focusing on that format for a bit, if you're just having no confidence to spend the big bucks on Sidey and Danger, going, I'll make 50K, I'll cop an 85 at worst out of 6 weeks, and then I'll hope for a new forward to pop or for Sidey to have basemented out or whatever it is. I'm actually not opposed to that type of move in that format. Whereas, as you've said in SuperCoach and Dream Team, if you're picking him, it's because he's cheap, you think he's around the mark, and you plan to hold him for the year.
Yeah, I think that's so true, MJ. Is the appeal with Heeney is the safety. You feel like really what you're paying for, at the very worst, you'll get that back.
Yeah.
Now, I think the player you compare him to is a great one is Tom Phillips, and players like that is, if Tom Phillips gets everything going his way, especially in DT, which is his preferred format, I can see him being, a 9,500 guy. Like, I think he has that potential.
Yeah.
Again, on the flip side, he's coming from, one of the best fantasy teams to one of the worst fantasy teams. So there's possibility that, he's only an 80 guy. That is a possibility. I think the appeal with Heeney is that he's probably 90 in DT, and look at what he does in SuperCoach. It's probably 95.
Yeah.
And that's where you go, I don't have confidence in anyone else. So I know this guy will be around the mark. Do I think he's going to be top 6? No, but I think he's going to be 10th. I think he's going to be that range. Whereas we know there'll be a guy, we flagged a Petrarca earlier, we flagged Simpkin last year, because they were playing pure mid or predominantly mid at the very least with Petrarca. They have that ability to really challenge the big dogs. And when we look at the history of the big forwards, it's typically a midfielder, a forward eligible, exactly, who's playing as a pure mid, or in the rare instances, it's a big key forward who can kick bags and bags of goals.
Yeah, it's your buddies and your rewalts.
Yeah, and even we saw obviously Hawkins. He was so dominant in a shortened season. He was goal assist king. He was kicking goals for fun. That's the level it requires. That's why I say when Heaney has that split, as good as he is, it's just the nature of the role. He's not going to get enough ball to really challenge the 100. As I said, you might think, I'm not sure here. I'm not confident on the top tier. I don't see that Petrarca or Simpkin of this year. You know what? I'm going to get what I pay for at least, and I might get 10 points more, 15 points more best.
Totally. And
that's okay.
In the back line, maybe you're like, I want Laird, I want Whitfield,
you need some cash.
Lloyd, I want Williams. Well, now you're saving. I think it's like 250K in Dream Team from side bottom all the way down. Now you're talking about, I can, instead of settling for a Wayne Miller, not a bad pick, now I can go and get Zach Williams. And do I think I'm now in a better position? So that's the positive of a player like him. The negative, outside of just the ceiling component, is that multi-buy round. And again, to just make one round a big deal is always a bit dangerous. It is a little.
It is a big deal, MJ.
deal.
It is a big deal. I know I talked about it on the Petrarca episode,
Yeah.
but I'm going to do it again.
Good.
Just for people who missed that one. We're starting with 2 people down. And what I mean by that is our ruck line, we can't bank on having bench cover.
won't.
It's so unlikely we're going to have bench cover.
Unless you're going for Nick Nat or Goldie, or
Yep.
you're running Bruce for the year,
Yep.
you are copping a donut through there on the caveat that we don't get a cash cow ruck.
Yeah, which is unlikely. So we can't really bank on that when we're building our side. So what I mean by that is the best rucks, in my opinion, across the formats is a combination of these 3. It's Gawn, Grundy, and Riley O'Brien.
And you got Rowan
And-
Marshall.
Yeah, well, that's my next point, MJ, is people will be saying we can use Marshall to help cover. We can put, a dirt cheap R3 ruck forward to swing with Marshall.
Yeah.
Well, they've given us St Kilda that buy round as well. So Marshall's not even going to be available either. So if we're looking at our side and we're assuming that instead of our normal best 22, we know we're in a buy round, we've got best 18.
Yep.
Well, we're already down 2 players because our rucks are gone. You look at your forward line, Sidey, Walters, and Rowan Marshall alongside Heeney.
Okay.
Now, we've got to remember, MJ, we're at round 14. So in terms of upgrades, really, we should have probably, if you're going well, maybe 1 or 2. If you're not going too crash hot and you've had some injuries, maybe you've got 4 to go. But
Yeah,
really, we're at the point where
You're pretty close.
you're pretty close. We know it was only a 17-round season last year.
Yeah.
And we got pretty close. Can you slide into defense? Laird, Maynard, Crisp, Luke Ryan. Like, there's some heavy hitters, especially Laird and Lloyd.
Oh,
So if you think about that, MJ, if you've taken on Laird and Lloyd, which, again, if I'm speaking personally, I've got them right now.
mm,
Now I'm relying on all my bench rookies and other guys to play, or I'm down another player on the field. That's the issue of having rucks in particular, having a buy around together that's so big. Like, you've got Gaunt, Grundy, and Riley O'Brien all out of action.
yeah.
You're so handcuffed in who you've got on field. And as I said, if you go to another line, even if you go to the midfield,
Yeah.
Matt Crouch,
Mhm.
Taylor Adams, Nat Fife, Clayton Oliver, Christian Petrarca, Jack Steele.
That's just the big names, let alone
That's the
others that might
big
come up.
names. If you want to get, if you want to go and have a look at a Pendles,
Mm.
a Sloan, maybe you want to be that, you think Adam Cherry is going to go berserk, or Caleb Sarong,
One of the
all
Sydney
these
old
guys that
boys,
are
yeah.
possible. Like, MJ, we know how hard it is to have even just playing rookies at that time of the year.
It's a tough one for people. And again, you might go, well, I'll counterbalance it with those picks I do in the other 2 rounds. But again, they have elements and challenges in some of the other lines. Oh, it's okay. I'll just play 15 and I'll make it up. Okay. How many of those 15s are premiums?
And
how
MJ,
many-
we know good coaches, this is what
They
they
don't do
spend
that.
most of their time on. They
How am I
know
gonna get
that
this?
I'm picking a premium.
Yep.
He's in my side the whole
All the
year. Okay, so I've picked Gordon Grundy, let's say. I've picked
Laird and Lloyd.
and Lloyd. I've picked, I've picked Oliver in the midfield. I've
Yeah.
picked Matt Crouch.
Yep. Let's even just there.
Okay, that's okay. And then I've got Sidey and Heeney.
Yeah.
So now, if I have no forward rookie playing, if I have one back rookie not playing, I'm already down to fielding 18 with my rucks being out. You get any
Yep.
other injury, a resting. That's why by not picking a Heeney and
Mhm.
picking someone from the other round, you're balancing that out going, okay, I know that my premiums will be available this round because
Yeah.
I'm already down 2 in the ruck and I can't do anything to fix it. And really, you probably don't want to, because I think those guys are clearing
Well,
away
that's it.
the
And
best
that's
options.
where it becomes is you start thinking about your 3 trades a week in that. You're using 1 or 2 to sideways trades. Now, could that be the right strategy?
And that could be a strategy. Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
That's your play. But what we're talking about is entering into the year with full visibility on what the round could hold and what are the things that could trip you up from your ultimate success by the end of the year.
And that's the thing, MJ. Like, it's all well and good to have a plan like that, but we know what always happens is, I'm going to do 3 sideways premium trades. And then invariably, the play that you were banking on being there from another buy round isn't there. You get an injury.
It's a
All we're
suspense.
saying now is, consider this. If you pick this many premiums from this round when you know 2 of the biggest players in the game, in Gawn and Grundy in particular,
Mm.
are out, there will be pain if you're not paying attention.
100%.
And all we're asking is, if you're weighing up two players, just have a look at that buy structure. Is it Heeney versus Zorko? Okay. You know, one's round 14, one's not. You know, is that what I want to do?
How it is? Yeah.
Just see how it builds up, because, again, this issue will keep happening until they separate Gawn and Grundy in the buy round. If they're all the same, we have to be wary of this.
Yeah.
And it will be a big moving week. It will be a big moving week. You can see it now. Round 14 is going to be people who've set themselves up.
Yeah.
Are going to make massive strides, and people who don't, and they get a bit of misfortune, which we know is part of this game.
Absolutely.
Are going to get really stung, and it's going to be a tough sled in the run home to make it up.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Not just how people choose to approach him this year, the trades through that round 14, but also the draft, where he goes. He's definitely not among the first 2 or 3 forwards off the board. We've talked about it a few times throughout this preseason. Our dear friends at the Draft Doctors have the mock draft simulator out now. Go and check it out. I don't even know if it's officially released, but it's working. So go and try it out anyway, and try different formats. And if you've noticed, if you don't pick up one of these top 10, top 15 forwards early, and when I mean early, I mean inside the first 5 rounds, you're looking at guys like Jai Caldwell as your F1, which is not where you want to be drafting. So I don't think he goes inside the top 20 overall selections, Kane. I don't think that's too high. But as a round 3 selection, maybe you want to lock in a midfielder and then one of a ruck and a defensive option in your first 2 picks. Round 3, Whitfield, you know, Lloyd, Laird, those big defenders are gone. The big forwards of Sidebottom and Dangerfield, and probably Josh Dunkley and Dane Zorko are gone by then too. Even a Rowan Marshall with that DPP is going to give him the variance ahead of others. But as a round 3 pick, because I think he's a top 10 forward for us this year across the formats, I think it's about as early as he goes. But I think by the end of round 4, he's probably off most draft boards. Where do you think he's going on the draft day, man?
Yeah, I think that's about the line, MJ's. Round 3 is the earliest, and it would have to be the back end of round 3. It's just, like you said, the hard thing that's with his value is there's not many good forwards. There's the big guys that we think people have a lot of confidence in. I think the hard thing is once you start getting to the Heeneys, there's not much that's appealing after that, whereas the midfield line, in particular in a draft, is so deep that you can just say, if I don't get Heeney now, who am I going to get that I'm happy with? Whereas in the midfield, there's so many guys that you can just go between. So I feel like for me, round 5 is where I wouldn't want to see him slide past. I'd be really keen to get in there, about there. I think round 4 is probably your perfect time.
It's a sweet spot.
As I said, and it's because of what you mentioned with the scarcity of forwards, because really after that, it just falls away so much that I'd rather just take what comes to me and, reassure my other lines. And it seems like we talk about this every year with the forwards, MJ, but it is that position with defense that you get a lot of gold off the scrap heap. You just get a lot of gold of people that you weren't expecting to stay in there. Even a guy like Dan Butler was relevant all year in drafts, and particularly early, was pushing the top 20, 25 forwards with how well he started. So, again, the appeal of Heeney is, like we said, you're going to get a good return. Is he going to push top 5? Probably not. But sometimes you need in a draft to go, I'm not trying to hit a home run. I'm just trying to get on base. I just want to get it going, be comfortable, and take a risk somewhere else. And again, really, outside of last year, the durability is good, which is always going to help a player like him in draft.
That's right. Look, he's running, he's doing all the training work, he's on target for round 1. So barring a setback, we should see him, according to the club, through that one community series game, and definitely have him playing round 1. Mate, appreciate your thoughts today. A little bit of a longer episode today, as we've talked about Isaac Heeney, because he's just such a fascinating player. Thank you, mate.
No problem.
If you want to go and check out the article, I could guarantee it is not as in-depth as that podcast. That is for sure. You could go and check it out, though, if you'd like. Anyway, for all the stats, facts, and figures on Heeney at coachespanel.tv, all the other players revealed so far, they are all there, both their articles and also links to the podcast. You can get these every single day throughout the preseason. We have got articles dropping, helping you with your fantasy footy side. And if you are loving these podcasts and want to get more of them and earlier, as well as other content, some free cash prizes involved, a bunch of other stuff, consider joining our Patreon supporter group. All the links for that are at coachespanel.tv. An age that I feel a long time ago for me, 21. Not so long ago for you though, Kane, so shut up. Is the number, not the age, the number we're getting to tomorrow is 21. Should I give a clue, Kane? I feel like as we get further into these,
they've been so loyal. If they've listened to all of this Heeney podcast, it's probably a carrot that they deserve.
Okay. We mentioned his name already in this episode.
Jeez, I'm rattled.
So go back and listen through the last 78 minutes.
I said a lot of names.
I listed his name, or you did actually, listed his name already in this episode. Who is it? Kane's going to madly check his notes. Otherwise, you can join our Patreon supporter group right now and get the answer because they already know.